Corporate Governance Audit Committee this Wednesday, the 17th of March 2021. Just to let you know that we are webcasting this meeting. So if you are sending messages across to each other, please remember that. Yeah. It would be helpful if we keep our cameras on so we can see people. But obviously, if your speech starts to break up, it does help if we turn our cameras off. It helps that we get a clear voice through. Okay, if we go on to then agenda item number 1, which is apologies. We've had no apologies. Moving on then to agenda item number 2, any declarations of interest? Gary?
Members are reminded of their obligations under the Code of Conduct for elected members to consider whether or not they have a personal or prejudicial interest in any business that's before the committee today. If a member has a personal interest, then they must make a declaration now or as soon as they become aware of the interest. But declaring a personal interest would still allow them to take part in any debate and any vote. If members feel that they have a personal and prejudicial interest in any matter before the business, then they must make that declaration now or as soon as they become aware of the interest. However, if they declare a personal and prejudicial interest, then they will need to leave the meeting for the duration of the consideration of that business. And if any member declares an interest today that hasn't previously been declared and recorded, then they will need to complete a declaration of interest form.
Thank you, Gary. So, is there any declarations of interest? No. Moving on. Agenda item number 3. Urgent matters. Notice of items which, in the opinion of the chair, should be considered at the meeting as a matter of urgency, pursuant to section 100B of the Local Government Act 1972. I've had nothing put forward to me. Moving on then to agenda item number 4, which are the minutes of the last meeting. They're on pages 7 and 18, 7 to 18. I'll run through the pages first of all, and then if we can come back for matters arising. Page 7, and sorry, this is for the meeting of Wednesday, the 27th of January, 2021. Well, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16, page 17. If you remember, we was here a long time that day. So if we go back for any matters arising, members? No, I don't see any hands. Yeah. Can somebody propose them, please? Martin, did you want to bring some up?
Just to say, really, I think a lot of the things that we discussed, certainly in relation to, the local government changes, we're still waiting really to hear about what some of those proposals will entail. For example, corporate governance changing with more lay members, lay member possibly chairing that committee. Will that lay person get the chairman's allowance? I'm assuming they will. So there's a lot of unanswered questions there yet, but we'll just have to wait and see, Mr. Chairman. If you want me to, I'll
just bring Gary in to answer some of that.
Yes, that's right. There will be various aspects of the Act that will be subject to further regulation and further guidance. But we did last week, I think it was, have the first commencement order, which sets out commencement for quite a number of the provisions. So the provisions that relate specifically to this committee and its makeup won't come into force until May next year. So there will be time for us to consider any of those issues before we have to make the relevant changes to the Constitution.
Thank you, Gary. Yes, so could I have a proposer and a seconder to the minutes, please? Alan and Martin. Thank you. Moving on then to agenda item number 5, socio-economic duty for Wales. I think that's Nicola Neal. I think this is the 4th time I've seen it, but it's something that this council will have to get used to. So over to you, Nicola.
If it's okay, Chair. Councillor Richard Bain on here. I'll introduce the report if that's okay.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we're here this morning to inform the committee of some changes that have been embraced or enacted by ministers at Welsh Government. Under the Equality Act 2010, sections 1 to 3 are going to be put in force across the whole of Wales. And that brings with it a responsibility to modify, change, think differently in the way we go about our work. Because in a levelling up exercise, if you will, what we're looking to do is to reduce socio-economic deprivation. So when strategic decisions are being made within our authority, each and every time, we are to be minded that if there's a couple of ways of going about doing things, the way that least increases or enables or lets continue the deprivation and poverty suffered by some of our residents, we must be minded and proactively look for ways to reduce that deprivation. And always take a positive step in the direction that moves the council in the right way to look after those most deprived. So we're informing the committee today of the key changes in some key functions to enable us to satisfy our requirements under this legislation. In your report pack today, you'll see that we're very much along the chain. This has already been to Cabinet and decisions have been made. It's been shared with the SLT and widely adopted. It's been to chairs and vice chairs. And then we've literally over the next, well, from tomorrow onwards, the next 5 days, this has got to be rolled out to the people that'll actually work with the policy and see that it's being adopted. The way we're going to go about this is the wellbeing impact assessment will be modified. And when you acknowledge that you've made a decision and you've given mind to, and you're mindful of the ramifications within the wellbeing impact assessment, you're acknowledging and you're confirming that you've given mind to your socio-economic duty for Wales. Very quickly, we're hoping this will just become business as usual, but this committee has pretty much got to take ownership of that wellbeing impact assessment procedure and the bits you're responsible for, own them, if you like, where you feel that socio-economic duty isn't being met, it's really up to, well, for everybody, but especially this committee, to challenge officers if we think that we're not being robust enough. So that's very quickly, because I'm mindful your last session went on for hours, and that's a real quick canter through what's been a lot of work and a lot of consideration, because this is very important. We'd like to see these policies working effectively as they can, as quickly as they can. So I'll hand back to you, Chair, and I'm sure Nicola Neal will cover all the bits I've missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for that. Nicola, do you want to come in?
Just to add, thank you very much for that, Councillor Maynan. Yes, in addition to the wellbeing impact assessment, we've also reviewing some of the key decision-making and planning frameworks that we have in the council. So again, in the report, you'll see that we've alluded to the fact that we'll review planning policy. We've reviewed the e-learning modules and the web presence or the web content under the equality pages that we have. We'll review planning policy, HR policies in future, and internal audit. We'll also give consideration to this duty in future. Just a few examples of the key decision-making tools that will be reviewed, which to legal on the 25th of March. Thank you.
Hi, Nicola, can I ask you to put your camera off? We've lost you, the last bit of that.
Sorry, apologies. Sorry, where did I get up to? Where did you lose me?
Just the last 2 sentences, Nicola.
Just after e-learning, Nicola.
Oh, okay, yes. Just to let you know that, we've reviewed quite a few of the decision-making frameworks in place in the council, and they're listed in your report. Thank you. Diolch.
Thank you, Nicola. Any questions from members on this? All very quiet. No? Well, it's something, obviously, we're going to... go on, Martin.
Yeah, yes, Chairman. I note obviously in the report, and I had noticed before, that, for example, school governors will not be controlled by Welsh Government in this way, but that we as elected councillors will be. So we will have to think as the government in Cardiff tells us to think. And I find that rather insulting, but there you go, that's life. And we have to put this into our framework. I think ultimately as councillors we should always be thinking about these issues. I'm sorry that we have to be directed in such a way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Anybody else before we go to the recommendation? Okay, it is quite a long recommendation, but here we go. Recommendations are that the committee members note the reasons behind the duty, its definitions, commits to giving due regard to the duty, and ask all members of all committees and officers attending those committees to do so. 3.2, committee members note the core functions that are adapting to the duty and ensures the adaptations are made. See 4.3 below for the list of the core functions. That committee members inspect wellbeing impact assessments with respect to inequality of outcomes that results from socio-economic disadvantage / poverty. Ensure they take ownership for the wellbeing impact assessments for which they are responsible. Challenge officers to provide evidence or take steps to fulfil in knowledge gaps in wellbeing impact assessments and challenge the conclusions of the assessments, asking officers whether their conclusions are accurate or are likely to be accurate, and avoid the challenge optimism bias. Are you happy with that, members? Can you please show? Thank you very much. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Nicola. Moving on then, members, to agenda item number 6, which is the Alternative Service Delivery Model, ASDM Toolkit, pages 55 to 94, to consider a report by the Strategic Planning Team Manager on the Alternative Service Delivery Model, the ASDM Toolkit for the Council. 55. Yeah, is this you taking the lead, Richard?
Yeah, you stuck with me again, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
and again, just to expedite things, this is a toolkit that, as best practice, this committee, which does some sterling work, you requested this in January, so that all of our best policy, all of our best guidance, all of our resource, which of course enables better scrutiny, was all in one place. So here we are in March, couple of months later, and what you have is, whenever you're going to be working in collaboration or partnership, this brings together. It's like one of those flow charts where what is it you're doing, which structure have you adopted? This is pretty much what's expected, and here's some templates. It's a wonderful reference tool. It's been consulted with everybody and every department and every service that is going to use it. They've been actively involved right up to bringing it to this point. So they are already bought in. There's nothing to communicate. They know what it is. They know where the stuff is, and they're going to run with it. Interestingly enough, on page 10, we're already making reference in this new report to socio-economic duty, which is, of course, the last item. So that's really good to see. Hopefully today, this committee is going to look at the work that's been done and look at how concise the report is, and it will be robust enough for what you asked for in January. So back over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Nicola, are you coming in on this?
Only to add that the toolkit is intended to be read something as a manual and as a guide to help to guiding officers and members to identify the most appropriate mode of service delivery, to consider good practice in establishing the governance arrangements around them, and then it includes tools to help to ensure that those delivery arrangements continue to be sound in the future. That's the purpose of the toolkit. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Members, it's a comprehensive report. Does anybody want to come in, comment on this report, please? Yes, Martin.
Just one quick question, really. I think it's a good report. It's excellent. It's what we asked for earlier in the year. It's about best practice. It's about guidance. So that's grand. There was just a statement. I think it was on page 61. So apologies about this, but it says public bodies in particular need to ensure that they do not trigger procurement rules. That seemed a bit a strange one-line statement in there. I wonder if somebody could just clarify what that means, because I think I've said why in my notes.
Yeah, could somebody come back on that one?
Where on the page are you, Martin, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I've put page 61
down
here, but I'm not sure now that's where
I believe
it is.
Gary will come in on this.
Yeah. Okay.
It's 61.
Yeah.
Paragraph 7 of page 61.
Yeah. So effectively, what it goes on to say is, so it says public bodies in particular need to ensure that they don't trigger procurement rules. As part of this process, it's advised that before any partnership is entered into, a report must be submitted to the Council's professional leads for insurance, financial services, legal services, human resources, audit and procurement services for comment and advice. I think what the word trigger there is that inadvertently trigger such that we breach without knowing that we're doing it, because clearly we need to make sure that what we're doing is either exempted under the procurement rules or that we're following the procurement rules. And then with the HR stuff, it's about, are we triggering TUPE or are we not triggering TUPE, and just being aware of all of those things before we make a decision.
That's grand. Thanks for clarification.
Any other member wants to come in, comment on this report? I mean, it's a toolkit, isn't it? It's a toolkit for us to use going forward. So I think it's following through the toolkit. It just helps us better to make sure that we're doing things in the correct way. Any other members want to come in before I go to recommendation? Steve, was it you put your hand up? Oh, he's just waving at me. Okay, mate. Okay then, members. If we go to the recommendation, and the recommendations are: the committee notes the contents of the ASDM toolkit, its intended use, its definitions, and approves its use both within the council and when the council is working in partnership. Could I have a proposer, please? Looking for Alan, and seconded by Martin. Thank you. Again, Richard, thank you very much, and Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for clarifying. Bye.
Bye. Moving on then, we're moving agenda item number 7 to after agenda number 9. So we'll go on to agenda number 8, which is the certification of grants and returns, which is on pages 117 to 132. 117, 132. And that's to consider a report by the Head of Finance and Assets, which sets out a summary of the key outcomes from the WAO certification work on the Council's 2019-20 grants and returns. Is that you, Steve?
Yes, I'll introduce it. There's 3 reports that I'll be really introducing for Audit Wales to really talk to. They're their reports, but I just do the cover report. The other 2 are more straightforward. This one, I just got a few things to note before I hand over to, I assume Matt will take it. Yeah, the reports, obviously what we want is assurance from Audit Wales that we have good or adequate procedures in place, and
Steve, we're losing you. Can you turn your camera off?
Yeah, I was gambling there that it would work.
Thank you.
I was there. Yeah, sorry about that. So the whole point of this is to give assurance to the council that we have adequate or good or poor, if that's what their decision is, arrangements in place for the arrangements of grants. Now, not the significance of this report, but the scope of this report has reduced over a number of years as Welsh Government has reduced the number of grants that require this level of audit. So there are only 4 remaining now, but it is really still important that we get that adequate or good assurance. So this year it was adequate assurance. I guess I'm slightly disappointed that the teacher's pension one has been qualified, because, you know, I think that's, I'll leave to Matt to comment, but I think it's a technical reason really, where the auditors weren't able to do their checks because of COVID restrictions. So it's not a reflection on the grant itself. It's the fact that they couldn't do the assurance work that they felt they needed to do. The subsidy one is a tricky one. It's a very complicated grant, and that has been qualified over a number of years. But yeah, you know, that's fair enough. So I just wanted to point out that although it's 50% of these grants, there are only 4 grants, and one of them actually was qualified for, not, you know, we didn't have any choice about that really, because the checks couldn't actually be done that Audit Wales needed to do to sign off an unqualified audit certificate on that one in particular. So I've got no other comments really. I mean, I'm pleased with the adequate, under the circumstances, under the COVID restrictions and the amount of work that everyone's been under. I'm pleased that we've, the report again shows that we have adequate arrangements in place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve, for that. Tony, you've got your hand raised. Do you want to come in?
Sorry, Chair.
There we go. Unmute. Is that okay, Chair? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. There's a feedback. I don't know why that is. But anyway, I'll go ahead because I don't know if you're getting the feedback. So, Steve, last week, Councillor Rachel Flynn and myself became aware, accidentally, that in our ward, a £90,000 grant had been awarded to do some essential work on the footpaths. Now, we found out about it, but the worrying thing is that this part of the land, even though DCC own it, it's leased out to someone else who aren't happy for this work to go ahead. And we were told by the officer that if nothing's in place by next Friday, then the £90,000 goes back to Cardiff. Now, what my question is going to be is, do we have many incidents where we as a county are given money by Welsh Government, but because we don't do it, it has to be then returned? Are there many incidents in the course of a year, please?
Yeah, I'll take that. Chair, can I just mention that probably Matt needs to come in, because actually Matt will want to talk to the body of the report. I've just covered the cover report, but I can answer Tony's, Councillor Flynn's question. Obviously, that isn't within the scope of this report. There are 4 particular grants that are the subject of this report on the work that Audit Wales are reporting on. As far as the general question, though, no, there aren't that many. There is at year end always a push from Welsh Government to deliver schemes late in the year, and you might say, well, Welsh Government need to plan that better. They do, but it is a partnership, and Welsh Government would say, well, that's because X authority hasn't told us that they've got an underspend on a certain funding stream. So they'll report back to Welsh Government, they'll collate all that information, and they'll realise they've got some additional funding because certain authorities haven't been able to spend that money. So we do tend to have a lot, and this year in particular, because of the COVID funding, we have had a lot of late grants in. Now, some of those have been certainly the capital ones, the way they've done them, and you'll know, if anyone who's on SIG or seen those papers that also go to Cabinet for this one, there's a education repairs and maintenance grants that we usually get an allocation of late in the year. And what we're allowed to do with that is use it to pay for our existing expenditure and therefore carry forward our own funding into the following year. And education have to come back with a plan to show how they're going to spend that in the spirit of what the grant was originally given. But no, we've got a good track record of delivery on these late schemes. It does mean a lot of work for SIG late on in the year to approve a lot of this, and a lot of have to be done via email just because of the lateness and the difficulty in scheduling meetings. But they're actually to give money back is few and far between.
Okay, Tony. Yeah. Thank you. Did you want to come in, Matt?
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. I think Steve's probably stolen my thunder, in all honesty. He's covered most of the points I wanted to make. But as Steve said, this report really summarises the key findings from our grants work over the year. And as Steve said, that has been diminishing and has reduced significantly this year as a consequence of Welsh Government's policy decision to remove the need for us to certify a number of schemes. And some of those are quite large schemes historically. So that's why the fees reduced as well, you'll see in the report. In terms of just a couple of things to draw to your attention, paragraph 6 refers to 2 of the 4 claims were qualified, and that's on page 124. And this is higher qualification rate than the long-term Welsh average, but that long-term Welsh average takes into account that there were far more claims certified in previous years, so I wouldn't read too much into that either. The only other points I'd make, just coming back on Steve's observation around the teachers' pensions return, where we certify that on behalf of the teachers' pensions up in Darlington, was, yep, Steve's quite right. We did qualify that due to us being unable to conclude one of our tests because we weren't able to visit the office due to the COVID restrictions. Unfortunately, there's a requirement for us to report that where that's required, where we're unable to fulfil our full duties. But we made that clear to teachers' pensions, the reasons for that, and it's for them now. If they feel they need to follow that up with the council, I'm sure they will do. But certainly no concerns in terms of the compilation of that claim from our perspective. At that point, Chair, I'll leave it there, but gladly take any questions on any specifics. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any other questions from the committee? Joel?
Thank you. Yeah, just on the teachers' pension, presumably that was a similar case for all counties in Wales. It wasn't just a Denbighshire thing.
It depended on the arrangements. I think it probably was specific to Denbighshire in that electronic copies weren't readily available to us, or to monitor or to supervise those reports being produced, where in other places they were able to share screens, for example. If these restrictions continue into the autumn this year, which is when we undertake this work, then that's something we could explore early with the payroll team to try and address that going forward, so it doesn't become a recurring thing whilst we have restrictions in terms of movements. But I think that specific issue was specific to Denbighshire this year due to the working arrangements.
Okay, so something to possibly look at in the future. But I mean, is it something that we should be looking at even if all the restrictions go? If the other authorities don't have that issue, is it something that it is an issue in Denbighshire that we should be looking at anyway?
Yeah, I think it is. And certainly we can pick that up with the payroll team. As I say, we'll explore that to try and mitigate that this year as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Matt. Any other members before I move on to another member outside the committee? No. Merrick, you wanted to come in?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your kindness. I think this is a question to Matthew, if I may. Two parts. The first part, I'm looking at the report that they've sent a copy of. Why is the report only using a third of the page, the 2/3 of the page, which is blank? It's a waste of paper and a waste of space. Doesn't the auditor try to save money and not spend money unnecessarily? And my second question, you talk about, or it has been mentioned about the teacher's pension. This work qualify, which totally confuses me. If you can't do something, how is it qualified, if you understand what I mean? It's the meaning of the word qualified that confuses me in this context. Thank you for the questions. With regards to the fact that some pages are blank or have got blank spaces, we look into that. Thank you for raising that, and hopefully we can resolve that for next year as we move forward. I understand your point. With regards to your second point, the term qualified, that's the term we've agreed on with the bodies who pay the grant, so it's their term. So we follow the guidance that they've published so that they see what they expect when we report back. So unfortunately, we can't move away from that terminology.
Okay, Mary.
Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Thank you, Matt. Anybody else before we move on? Martin?
Just one quick clarification. You know, in those areas that we're talking about, the housing benefit, I'm right in saying that's £123 that we're querying there, is it? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yes, it was, Martin. Yeah.
Yeah, doesn't seem, when you look at the overall figures that we're dealing with, you know, an issue of £123 doesn't seem a great deal. Let's put it that way. Thank you very much.
No, I agree. If I can just come back on that, Martin, if I may. Later on, when we look at the audit plan, we'll talk about materiality and thresholds we apply to the audit. And unfortunately, we don't audit or apply that threshold when we audit grant claims. We audit to the penny. And again, that's unfortunately what the grant paying bodies require us to do. So regardless of the amounts, we're required to report those back, fortunately. But yeah, that's what the regulations require us to do.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Matt. Okay, then, members, moving on to the recommendation. The recommendation is, it is recommended that the committee considers the content of the audit. God, I've lost myself here. Audit Wales report. The Audit Wales representatives will attend the meeting to answer any questions. I wondered if David wants to add anything.
No, Chair. There's nothing from me. I cover performance. Matt covers the financial aspects. Thank you very much. Okay, David.
Members, could I have a show that you're happy with those recommendations? We've got Alan and Martin. Thank you. Moving on then to, I'll get mixed up here, but agenda number 9. That's right, isn't it? Yeah. Which is the annual audit summary, pages 133 to 144, to receive information from Audit Wales on the annual audit summary for Denbighshire County Council, copy enclosed 133. Obviously, Julian isn't with us today to be starting the report. Is it you, Steve, that's coming in first?
Yeah, I'll just briefly introduce, but really it's just a very, very short introduction. This is the audit summary. It used to be called the annual audit letter, or that was the previous incarnation of this sort of report. It's been the annual audit letter. I think this is the second or third year now that it's a bigger document, a bit more wide ranging, certainly more user friendly, and hopefully more interesting to members, I guess, and that's the aim of it. It is a summary of the work that done over the previous year. So on that note, really, I'll pass on to either David or Matt, depends who's leading first on it. I'm sure both will want to comment.
Yeah, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve. Just before I do as well, if it was remiss of me not to introduce Jodie Williams to the committee, a member of our team who's recently got promoted as an audit lead on the audit. So hopefully you'll get to see Jodie over the coming years as regular attendee from the team as well to present reports in the future. But she's come along today just to observe the meeting.
Welcome to Denbighshire, Jodie.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so as Steve said again, he set the scene really. This is a new format in terms of us pulling together the key findings from our 2020 work. And this is the final output from last year's audit plan, where we look back at the key findings that arose last year. And it draws a line under our work from that year as well, covering the key areas of our work around the audit opinion and also our performance work, which Dave will just touch on shortly. As Steve mentioned, it is a new format. It's something we're trialing this year to make things more readable, hopefully more user-friendly, more accessible to those in the public as well, or stakeholders. And again, would welcome your feedback on this new format if you find it more useful and more readable. We'd love to hear your thoughts as well on how usable that is. But it basically provides an overview of the Auditor General's duties and of the Council, and it summarises those key findings. There shouldn't be any surprises in the document. I think it pulls together all the key messages that we've previously reported either to you or nationally. And there are useful links in there to take you through to the detailed documents or detailed reports that we've produced during that period. I won't say any more than that. Is there anything you want to add, Dave?
Yeah, certainly. As Matt said, it summarises our previous work. In terms of performance, it covers a number of reports that you will have already seen during the year, which are specific to Denbighshire. It includes the couple of reports that are national reports, where the implications may apply to Denbighshire, but are not named specifically to Denbighshire. And it includes the local government studies that the work that's been undertaken, which obviously covers all of local government. So, as Matt said, no surprises, or there should be no surprises in the work. I just wanted to draw your attention to our update of the current work, because it looks like there's a long list of work in there. You may be thinking, well, are you not doing it? But well, I just want to show you that we are. The recovery planning and the COVID learning has been reported during the year, and we'll continue to look at this because it's a live piece of work. The Assurance and Risk Assessment workshop took place in February, so we've completed our work around there. And that obviously feeds through to the audit plan, which we'll be considering later in the meeting. Financial sustainability, phase 1 has been completed, and we're working on phase 2 at the moment. The environmental ambitions piece of work, planning is underway and delivery will be in May. The Economic Ambition Board work, the draft report was issued to the Portfolio Management Office last week, and the commissioning of older people's care home placements, the field work will be completed in March, and then we'll be moving on to drawing all the key messages together. So we'll be reporting in the summertime. So whilst it looks a list of things that are still being done, and bearing in mind we are still in the financial year, we are well down the road with it. So unless I'll quite happy to take any questions if you wish.
Thank you, David. Okay. Welcome, Paul. I know you've had trouble getting into the meeting, so welcome. Members, pass it over to yourselves for comment. Yes, Martin.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, it's a very good report, and when you start reading, think that this is great, you know, because most of our reports are extremely meaty on this corporate governance committee. I did start to click on the here's in the report, which I think I would probably need a week to read most of the detailed reports in there. So yes, it's nice to have the pointers, but I must admit, if I was to read them all, I would be probably reading for a week as I go through all those issues. And there's some interesting ones in there because obviously, you know, domestic abuse and sexual violence is something that's prominent at the moment. But again, you know, your report really is a general national report rather than something applicable to us as a council. But do you see us getting involved in that particular thing, you know, and that issue, which is, you know, a big issue in the country at the moment? Do you see local government taking a strategic, you know, position on that, or an involvement in that? I think we do, obviously, as councillors, we do get reports occasionally, which we then feed through to social services and things like that. But do you see that growing? The other thing was, I think I picked out in this report, National Fraud Initiative. There was £8 million worth of fraud committed in Wales. Do we know where Denbighshire comes into that? Do we know whether there were frauds committed against us, and have we identified those, and have we dealt with them? Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Dave,
shall I go first, Matt, and then I'll hand over to you for the tricky stuff. Sorry, for the NFI stuff. Yeah, thanks for your comments on there. The reason that we attach the links is because we want it to be a comprehensive report. And if there's a report that you've not seen for a while, or you're not sure whether it's the one that you think it was, for example, the financial sustainability report, we've done a few pieces of work, so you may just want to know which one we're actually referring to. So it's not intended that you go back and read all the reports, because, as you say, that would be a mammoth task. So so that's the reason that we attach the links. You mentioned a couple of the local government studies that have been done across all Wales, and it's a really good point that you raise. Our expectation with this is that officers will consider the national report, the local government reports, and identify whether there are any issues that they believe relate specifically to Denbighshire. And we would expect officers then to be reporting those through the governance arrangements, through yourselves, or maybe through scrutiny, depending what the issue is. So that I hope that answers your question, Councillor Holland. It's for officers really to decide the relevance of it. And I think the one that you quoted was published quite some months ago, before the current raised awareness of it just at the moment. So you may want to revisit that one as a council. On the National Fraud Initiative, Matt, can I hand over to you for that, because you know a lot more than I do about that.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So yeah, the National Fraud Initiative is a national initiative that we feed in across UK as well. The report that's linked, I think, covers Wales specifically, and Denbighshire is a participant in that initiative and does contribute and analyses the data. In terms of the specifics for Denbighshire, I don't have those to hand. I know Lisa, the team internal audit, contribute to the work on the NFI in terms of reviewing any potential matches at the council. But I'm not sure whether that led to any specific incidents of proven fraud at the council, but we can certainly provide some local analysis if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I can come in on that, Chair. The internal audit update report that I provide to committee, we provide a summary of the NFI results, and that is reported normally at the end of the exercise, but we do give an update partway through the exercise as well. So that will be included in my next update, as the previous exercise has been concluded and we started a new one now. Generally, though, we find errors, but not so many frauds. Benefit council tax are referred to.
Lisa, can you put your video off, love?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm not sure how much you caught of that, but the we don't pick up as many frauds as part of the NFI, but we do pick up a number of errors, and there's a financial element associated with that, generally linked to housing benefits, council tax reduction schemes, those type of areas. If any are suspected fraud, they refer to the DWP for their shared service to investigate. So we're reliant on them picking that up and investigating those frauds. But like I say, at the next update committee, we'll provide some figures around that.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, Martin. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yes, we have to come back, Mr. Chairman. Just to say, I was aware that we'd had no reports on major fraud, but when you look at 8 million across Wales, and we will be talking about cyber security later as well, it's a growing issue, across the country. So yeah, thanks very much for the update there.
Thanks, Martin. Anybody else want to come in before we move to recommendation? No. Moving then to the recommendation. It is recommended that the Corporate Governance Committee note the annual audit summary for Denbighshire County Council from Audit Wales. I have a proposer and a seconder. Paul's proposing, Martin seconding. Thank you, members. Moving back to the agenda then, we're going to move backwards now to agenda item number 7. And that is the Audit Wales Audit Plan 2021-22 to consider a report by the Head of Finance and Assets, copy enclosed on the Audit Wales Audit Plan for 2021-22, pages 95 to 116. Is that you, Steve?
Yeah, again, I'm just introducing really for then David and Matt to run with really. While the annual audit summary is a summary of what work has been done, this is very much what work is going to be done over the next 12 months, both from a financial and performance point of view. So I'll keep it short so that Matt and Dave will be able to fill you in on the details. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Cheers, Steve.
Shall I come in there, Chair? Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So yeah, so as Steve said, really, hopefully, again, you receive this annual plan each year, setting out our planned work for the forthcoming year, covering our key areas of responsibility, mainly around the financial audit, which I look after, and also our performance audit work, which Dave again will talk about in a bit. In terms of setting the scene, I think as part of the grants report we discussed earlier, we talked about auditing to the penny, and as I mentioned earlier, slight difference with the opinion work and the audit of your financial statements is we apply the concept of materiality, so we don't seek to obtain absolute assurance on the truth and fairness of your financial statements and related notes. We apply the concept of materiality. In your case, just for information at this stage, at the initial planning stage, we've calculated that around 3.7 million, which is around 1% of your gross expenditure. So in that context, we consider then the sort of risks that you're facing, or we deem that you're considering as part of 2021. And if I can refer you to page 104, which summarises our audit of the financial statement risks. So that's the page 104 in your pack. And you can see the exhibit there summarises those key areas of focus that we're going to concentrate on this year in terms of your financial statements, and we've discussed these risks with Steve and his team, and we'll design a programme of work around these. The heading or the subheading within the table talks about significant risks, and this is terminology from the International Standards of Auditing, which define risks in different ways. And what we're talking about here is some of the key areas of our focus this year, where we're required to design specific procedures to address those specific risks. And the first one there around the risk of management override of controls at the bottom of page 104. The ICEs require us to consider that for all bodies, so we have little control over that whatsoever. And what that means, I guess, is that there is a risk that management could override their own internal controls. There could be incentives for them to manipulate things. We're not saying that's the case, but what we're saying is there is a risk. And what we'll do, we'll design a number of audit procedures around those to maybe consider areas where management may use means to influence that. For example, the use of journals or accounting estimates, And we'll also evaluate the rationale for any significant transactions that are outside the normal course of business. So there'll be specific things we'll look at there. Just turning over the page to page 105, you know, we're all meeting remotely today. The world's changed, COVID's impacting on everything. And there's two key areas, I guess, for this year that we're considering in terms of the impact of COVID on your financial statements. One is the impact on the way the council's working and the finance team. We're all working remotely, you know, that creates pressures and challenges in its own respect. And that, I guess, could impact or increase the risk around the quality of the accounts and the supporting working papers. So again, we'll work closely with the finance team, and we have been over the last couple of months to discuss the close down processes, what arrangements they're putting in place to monitor the close down plan, etc., and also around the quality assurance arrangements. And I think one of the key issues for us this year that we were grappling with is this should have been the first year where the council was required to prepare accounts in accordance with Welsh Government's early closure timetable. I think the committee are probably aware that we've been looking into this and working with the finance team for a couple of years now to get us up to speed to address that. Because of the pandemic, Welsh Government's recently clarified now that that timetable is being extended this year again, as it was last year. So instead of you having, as a council, having to prepare your accounts by the end of May and us audit them by the end of July, that's now been extended to, I think, mid-June from your perspective and early September. Or that's what we've agreed with Steve and the team as well. So in some ways that risk is mitigated, or it certainly helps mitigate that risk, but there's certainly more work for us to do there. And in terms of the other risk around the COVID-19 pandemic, it's clearly given rise to some significant new income streams for the council from Welsh Government in terms of the funding that's been made available and new areas of expenditure. So again, we're doing some work to understand those fully and to ensure that they're correctly accounted for and disclosed in the financial statements. And again, we'll continue to work over the coming months now with the finance team to try and progress that as quickly as possible. And the final significant risk, and this is probably the final risk I'll draw to your attention in terms of our key focus this year, although there are others identified in the plan, is around Denbighshire Leisure Limited and the fact that the company now has been established. And for the first time, Denbighshire will need to consider whether it needs to consolidate the company's accounts within what we call the single entity accounts, the council's financial statements, to form what's called group accounts. So again, some technical adjustments will be required, and we'll need to consider whether the council has considered those fully and have accurately reflected those transactions within the financial statement. So again, we'll work with the finance team to do that. As I say, there are other areas of audit attention you can see there in the table. I won't dwell on those just now, but again, happy to take any questions. Just moving on page 108, you can see under paragraph 19, exhibit 2 there, we just flag some other matters just for you to be aware of at this stage. They don't impact on the 2021 work, but things for you to keep under view and for us to discuss with Steve and the team going forward. The implementation of a new reporting standard on the accounting treatment of leases, again, something that's been deferred now for a couple of years because of the COVID pandemic. And also the Local Governments and Elections Act and the establishment of corporate joint committees. And with that, again, it will bring risks around governance and also the accounting requirements. So we'll keep those under view for when those are implemented. I'll just jump around a bit just briefly before I hand back to Dave on the performance audit, but just in terms of a couple of other elements of the report, just to flag with you, the fee and the audit team set out on page 112. And that's paragraph 34, exhibit 5 there. And you can see the fee largely remains unchanged from the previous year. We're confident at this stage that we can absorb those specific risks within the fee envelope that we've identified there. But obviously we'll keep that under review and raise that with Steve if we feel that isn't achievable. But we're fairly confident at this stage that we can deliver the work within the fee we set out there. And just finally from me, turning over the page in terms of the team, just to flag in paragraph 38 on page 113. The standards or the auditing standards do require us to flag any known threats to independence that we need to draw to your attention in relation to the audit team. And as in previous years, we're just flagging that myself and also a member of the audit team who happens to be with us today, Jodie, and both have relatives who are employed by the council. So as a result, we won't be involved in any work in relation to those services unless we've undertaken a detailed risk assessment. And should that independence be compromised, we'll report back to you as and when required. So I'll leave that there. Dave, do you want to come in on the performance aspects?
Yes, certainly. Chair, I just wanted to start off by just drawing attention to continuous improvement section of the plan. It's an issue that you queried yourself, and I know that Councillor Holland referred to this earlier. I think the important thing to flag here is that the Local Government and Election Wales Act, it will have implications to our work. If the local government measures to be repealed, that means that you probably won't have to do an improvement plan for next year, but you will have to do an assessment of performance. So we will still need to do an audit of your assessment of performance and issue, if everything's okay, a compliance certificate. So there is some of our work that's in the transition stage just at the moment with this. We had identified this already, and we'd got some revised wording for the audit plan, which we plan to talk to the council after the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee. So we do intend to make some changes there. It was mentioned earlier that the commencement orders are still to come through, so we're not too sure what the changes will be yet on our work, but we will bear that in mind as we go forward. The second thing that I just wanted to cover was our work programme for next year. As mentioned within the plan, we're still consulting over the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, the way that we've done the work to date through our examinations, and how we do that going forward. So we'll come up with some more clarity about this in due course. As I've just mentioned, we'll be doing the review of the assessment of performance, your assessment of performance and compliance with the legislation. The assurance and risk assessment work is becoming a more significant part of our work. This is where we draw together the intelligence of the council's arrangements, and we hold a workshop session each year with the senior leadership team to consider the risks to the council, and that then informs our work going forward. And the areas that we expect to be covering through this are around the current financial position. As we don't know where what the future of COVID is going to be, we'll be looking at how you're planning for recovery. We've mentioned the implications of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act as being a big issue, and we'll be looking at how you're going about implementing that. And then there's the carbon reduction plan. We've already got a piece of work in the programme this year around your environmental ambitions, but we'll be keeping an eye on the carbon reduction plan going forward. So they're ongoing pieces of work that we'll be doing during the year. And then we've got a thematic piece of work which will be done across all of Wales. It may be done slightly differently in different councils as needs demand, really, and circumstances commit. This is called Springing Forward, and we're going to be looking at the building blocks that you're putting in place for sustainable for sustainability in the future. We recognise that COVID has changed the world, the way that we're working, the way that we're communicating today, instead of in the chamber. So we're looking at how councils are responding to that and what it means for the future. So that's quite a big piece of work that we'll be planning to do during the year. So they're the pieces of performance work. It may change. This is a draft plan. So as things materialise and as we look at resources and the risks involved, we may change this as we go forward. But as we stand at the moment, this is how the performance audit work is looking going forward.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Matt. If I can bring Gary in.
Just on the commencement order, Chair, the very snappily titled Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021 commencement number 2 and saving provisions order 2021 was made on Thursday of last week. If you're looking for some lockdown entertainment, I suggest find some wet paint and watch it until it's completely dry before you start reading the order. But essentially what that does is it brings into force from the 1st of April the requirement of the council to do a self-assessment. The panel assessment doesn't come into force until May of next year. The provision within the 2021 Act which disapplies the 2009 measure is brought into force on the 1st of April, but it's to come into force as if it has no effect. I know that doesn't make sense in respect to a certain number of things, and one of those things is the requirement to produce a performance report or an assessment of our performance in the year beginning 1st of April 2020. So there'll need to be that done, and presumably there will then be issues for Audit Wales in respect to that. So as Dave said, it's a transitional provision effectively that brings the provision into effect, but not completely. Yeah. So we're in a sort of a greyish area. So the self-assessment from the 1st of April, but we'll still have to comply with the 2009 measure in terms of reporting on financial year 1st of April 2020 to 31st of March 2021, if that makes sense.
You're all nodding your heads. I'm not convinced. Anybody want to come in, members? Yeah, Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I think, Matthew, this is one for you. On page 105, you speak of the changes to the council's finances with support in relation to the pandemic. There have been lurid tales in the press of claims of money nationally being spent quickly and possibly carelessly. Presumably, there is work for not only yourselves when it comes to looking at the accounts, but also for NFI and for internal audit. And presumably these, can you give me an assurance that these different groups looking at different aspects will be coordinated? Because clearly, from what the press are saying, you don't believe everything from them, of course, but there is a suggestion that spending money quickly can not necessarily be, shall we say, compliant always.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think that's a good point. How do I respond to that? I think we need to think about the roles and responsibilities of us as your external auditors and what our powers allow us to do. And in terms of the opinion work, it is a true and fair view as to whether they are materially disclosed in accordance with the SIPFA requirements. Try not to get too technical here, but there is no regularity requirement for local government like there are in other sectors where we consider whether the money spent has been spent for the purposes intended, etc., which brings in the fraud aspect. But you're quite right, it does make sense there needs to be a coordinated response to this. And certainly I think there is a key role for internal audit here as well, and Welsh Government indeed as well. My understanding as it presently stands, but the picture's developing, is the focus of our work will be confirming the quantum of the monies that have either been allocated to the council or have been either passed on through an agency arrangement or the council's incurred, to ensure that those amounts are correctly disclosed and they've been treated correctly in the accounts, and that's the extent of our work at present. I know that there are discussions ongoing with Welsh Government to clarify whether there's any further requirements, but at the moment, my understanding is we're not required to consider the fraud aspects of any of that funding at present. But that's not to say that may not change. But clearly there'll be a role for the Society of Welsh Treasurers here, internal audit, as you mentioned, and it could possibly be a focus of the NFI work going forward as well.
Okay.
I'm not sure that answers your question, Paul, but hopefully gives you an idea of our approach.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Matt. Lisa, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, on that matter, in terms of NFI, there is a new data match that's coming as part of this exercise, looking specifically at the business rates grants. that came as a result of COVID. So that will do data matching with other councils as well. So if there's businesses in neighbouring authorities or elsewhere that are applying for the same grants that shouldn't be entitled to it. We have done an exercise or supported finance in terms of reviewing where there are potential duplicate applications that shouldn't be eligible for them within Denbighshire. So we've already sifted through those as part of our own arrangements. And internal audit has been advising on other grants as well, such as the free school meals, and doing data matching where we can with school information management information to make sure that those children are actually at school and they're entitled to those grants. So there's a number of initiatives where we've been involved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Martin, you want to come in?
Yes, please. Thanks very much. First and foremost, can I just say, wearing my other hat as a councillor and always concerned about budgets, it's nice to see that the fees are more or less stable for the coming year. But just one quick question on that one. Of course, you also say that there will be additional fees if we have, queries from members of the public. How do we control that? Because obviously we could have fixatious claims and things like that, and we end up paying the cost of those. I'm also concerned, and I see it in my own sort of post bag or email bag, that because people are at home, a lot more questions are coming than normal, because people have got a bit more time perhaps to scrutinise things. So just to put that on the table, that we may see more of those queries. On page 106, it's just a point of information really. IAS 19, what is IAS 19 disclosed liabilities? I understand liabilities, but I wonder what IAS 19 means and why that's so important in that particular one. And on, I think 108, you talk about, Matt mentioned reviewing leases. Is that just because that's part of the process, we haven't looked at that yet, or is there a concern there? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Martin. I'll respond to those. I'll take them in the order you've raised them. In terms of the audit fee, we build in a small contingency to deal with correspondence from electors and members of the public. I think it's safe to say we've probably had very little in Denbishire's case in the last couple of years, but I know historically we have. Should we be inundated, I think it'll be a matter of me having that chat with Steve to flag any impact on the fee, and we'd take it forward that way. What we certainly wouldn't do is spring it on you. So I think we'd have that engagement, we'd discuss it, try and work our way through, and then if we feel there is going to be an impact on the fee, we'd have that discussion with Steve to flag what we'd anticipate that being. And that's no different to any other year, but recognise what you're saying around COVID as well, that it may provide more scrutiny of the financial statements this year. In terms of IAS 19, that's the International Accounting Standards, which you as a council through SIPFA are required to follow. And IAS 19 refers to the pension liabilities, assets and liabilities that are held by the Clwyd Pension Fund in your case. It's one of the key estimates in your financial statements, so we undertake work around that. So we designed some audit procedures that you can see there set out on page 107 to consider the robustness and appropriateness of that estimate. So that's what that relates to. And then your final question on page 108, I think it was, and IFRS 16. This is again a requirement for all public sector bodies to comply with. As I mentioned, it's been deferred due to the COVID pandemic. It was meant to come in from the 1st of April this year. And SIPFA have indicated that to ensure that you comply with those requirements, traditionally you've held finance and operating leases. The finance leases will be held on your balance sheet. The operating leases, the costs will go through your I&E account. The new standard requires a real change there, where most leases now will be reflected as finance leases on the balance sheet. And what that means for you as a council and other councils and other public sector bodies is that there's a significant amount of work to ensure you can identify all those leases that you hold. You know, for a unitary authority, it can be quite a challenging piece of work. You've got a lot of schools who have arranged their own leases, for example. So there's a significant amount of work involved in trying to identify those. And once you've identified those, to ensure that they're correctly treated in accordance with what that new standard requires. So I think what we're doing at this stage is flagging that there is a significant amount of work there for the council and the finance team. It's something we've been discussing with Steve for the last couple of years now, because as I said, we thought it was going to come in earlier. So we're fairly confident you're in a position to meet those requirements. But again, that's not to say we need to maintain that dialogue to assess the position over the coming year.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, Martin. Any other member before I move outside the committee? No? Okay, Mary, you wanted to come in?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a question for David Wilson. I think you mentioned, David, work in the future, keeping an eye on how we are coping with the COVID-19 changes and so on. Can I ask, how do you audit central government? You know, whether they are keeping up so that we are able to do the work conveniently? Are they changing rules and regulations, legislation and so on, so that we are able to modernise or work in different ways? Because if they don't, how are we going to be able to change to improve things? Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm afraid the simple answer is I don't know. We do audit. We do audit work with Welsh Government, but unfortunately, it's colleagues who do that work. I don't get directly involved with them, so I'm not really in a position to be able to answer your question, I'm afraid. Sorry about that.
Thanks for your honesty, Dave.
Can I just say though? Can I just say that I am quite happy to take the query back though, and we will contact you. So whilst I don't know the answer, unless Matt wants to come in and fill in on that, I don't know. But
no, I think that seems sensible to me, Dave. It'll be more fuller response then as well.
You get what I mean? You know, it's about if they don't put things in place, how can we then comply to your requirements? If you're, you know, why haven't you done this, that, and the, you know?
Yeah.
Is that you've got the point?
Yeah, that's fine, and we've got the recording, so I can go back and get your full question and make sure that we deal with that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else, members, before we move on to recommendation? Okay, the recommendation is that the corporate governance notes the plan and has the opportunity to ask questions to understand the context and the focus for the proposal. Can I have a proposer? Alan, seconder? Martin, thank you. Moving on then is agenda item number 10. Corporate Governance Committee Work Programme, pages 145 to 148. Can I bring Lisa in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if there's any items to be added, I think, can I just make a note for the next month's agenda items? There's a number of follow-up reports that are due. Item 8 and 9 should both be, just to clarify, those are both follow-up reports. And then in June 2021, the annual governance statement should be a report coming to committee then as well. That's all from me. I don't know if anyone else has anything to input.
Programme. Steve, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just on the June meeting, the statement of accounts needs to come off that one, because I think that was before when we were still aiming to do the draft accounts by the end of May. So that needs to go on to the, oh, actually it's already on the July one, so that's okay. It just needs taking off the June one, and the Wales Office Audit Plan one is now, you've already had that one to this meeting. So that one can come off June's meeting as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. That makes that a little bit lighter. Gary?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're currently undergoing a desktop inspection by the commissioners for investigatory powers in respect of our RIPA activities. So once we get the report from that, that will need to come to committee, but we won't get that until maybe in time for the June or July meeting. And the other thing that we will need to put in the forward work programme, but only once we've had a chance to go through the commencement provisions properly in respect of the Local Government Act, is a report in respect of the changes that we need to make to various aspects of the Constitution, including the terms of reference and membership of this committee.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Lisa. Anything else, members, on that? No? Okay, then. Well, moving on, could I have a proposer and a seconder to move it?
Can I come in, please, Mr. Chairman, before you go to part 2?
Sorry, go on, Mary.
Thank you very much. I was a little bit late coming to you. If you remember, I drew your attention to this error previously, especially in the Welsh, probably more than in English, that you are not listed as chair and the vice chair hasn't been noted either on the agenda. I remember you thanked me for highlighting that at the time. It's still missing on the Welsh papers. I don't know whether anybody realised that and why it's that way on the Welsh papers. I raised this issue yesterday in another committee, and it was only in the Welsh version rather than the English papers. So you'll be able to see from your papers whether you're listed as chair and the vice chair is highlighted as well. Thank you.
But Gary's going to come in. Thanks, Merrick.
Na, Merrick,
No, Merrick, the fact that Councillor Miller is a chair doesn't appear on the English version either. I'll raise that with the team. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Gary.
Thank you, Merrick. Thank you, Gary. So could I have a proposer and a seconder to move into part 2, please? Alan is proposing, Martin is seconded. So we have to ask any members of the public or press to leave this part of the meeting as we go into part 2, confidential items. Just give us a minute, please.